The quiet holiness of Fr. Giuseppe Ungaro. A century of faith and service. Fr. Giuseppe Ungaro passed away earlier this year, but not without leaving behind a living legacy, witness of holiness communicated through his every word, action, and intention. His death marked the end of a remarkable chapter in the life of the Church, not just because of his extraordinary longevity, but more so for the depth and richness of his life's testimony. His was a century not merely of time, but of unyielding service, deep spirituality, and an uncanny ability to walk closely with the holy. Fr. Giuseppe, an Italian Franciscan friar, died in May at the age of 99, or as he liked to say, 100. In his own reflective style, he would remind those around him that a human life begins long before birth. I've been alive 9 months longer than you think. It was this kind of attention to sacred detail, his view of life as beginning in hiddenness and unfolding in divine time, that characterized the soul of the man. In recognition of his life of service and compassion, the city of Padua had honored him with the prestigious seal of the city. In 2018, it was a fitting tribute to a man who had spent nearly a century pouring himself out in the service of others. His mission was not performed under the limelight of grandeur or public acclaim, but in the quiet, consistent giving of self, a life of hidden sanctity, as humble and grounded as the brown Franciscan habit he wore. Over the course of his long life, Fr. Giuseppe had the rare privilege of encountering no fewer than 6 canonized saints. Each encounter was unique, each relationship distinct, and each left an indelible mark on his memory and spiritual vision. These stories were eventually shared with his Fr. Mario Conti, who recorded them for posterity in 2016 before another name would be added to the list. With the canonization of Pope Paul VI, Saints in the Flesh, his encounters with holiness. Among those Fr. Giuseppe met, 3 were Pope's successors of St. Peter, yet human beings in every sense. His relationship with Pope John XXIII, then still Cardinal Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, and Patriarch of Venice, was warm and personal. Fr. Giuseppe had been stationed at the Frari Basilica during that time, and came to know the future saint well. He often came to lunch at our convent in Venice. Fr. Giuseppe once recalled in an interview with St. Anthony Messenger, "We knew each other well." Such simple words, yet behind them lies the remarkable truth of a priest, who not only observed holiness from a distance, but shared meals and conversations with it. In the unhurried rhythms of conventual life, he came to recognize that saintliness is often unadorned, dressed in laughter and shared bread. He also encountered Popes Paul VI and John Paul II during their visits to the Basilica of St. Anthony in Padua, where Fr. Giuseppe resided for nearly 5 decades. These visits were more formal, but no less impactful. In his quiet observation of their devotion, pastoral zeal, and charisma, Fr. Giuseppe saw a different facet of sanctity, a kind of ecclesial courage and a willingness to suffer for the truth. Yet perhaps it was his encounters with 3 Franciscan saints that most deeply affected him, men who, like himself, had embraced the radical poverty and simplicity of Francis of Assisi. St. Leopold Mandic, the gentle confessor. St. Leopold Mandic, Croatian Capuchin friar, is known especially for his ministry in the confessional. Frail in body but immense in soul, he was often overlooked by the world, but revered by those who knew him. As a man of great humility, sensitivity towards others, and great wisdom, Fr. Giuseppe remembered. Every Wednesday, St. Leopold would make his way to the Basilica of St. Anthony. It was a ritual of devotion, always beginning with a prayer at the tomb of the great wonder-worker, the Anthony of Padua. But it was in the confessional where he spent the greater part of his day listening, absolving healing souls with gentleness and clarity. Fr. Giuseppe watched this humble service week after week and absorbed a lesson he would carry all his life. Sanctity is found in fidelity, especially to the hidden vocations of mercy. St. Maximilian Kolbe, faith in the face of humiliation. Fr. Giuseppe's relationship with St. Maximilian Kolbe offers yet another image of holy courage, this time born in suffering. A fellow Franciscan, Kolbe had returned from Japan at the time of their meeting, disheartened by the humiliations he had endured during his mission. And yet, despite the weight of rejection, his spirit remained luminous. He still had great faith and a great love for Our Lady. Fr. Giuseppe said, it was during one of their conversations that St. Maximilian encouraged him to make a personal vow to the Blessed Virgin Mary to give up smoking. "From that day I quit forever," he said simply, not out of pride but out of gratitude. Kolbe's martyrdom in Auschwitz was still in the future, but his sanctity was already present in the steadfastness of his devotion, in his ability to love without condition, and in the encouragement he offered to others, even while wounded himself. Saint Padre Pio, the mystery of suffering. Perhaps the most enigmatic and widely venerated of the saints Fr. Giuseppe met was Saint Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. Their paths crossed during the dark years of World War II, when Fr. Giuseppe was serving as a parish priest in Sabaudia, a town in central Italy. It was a troubled time in a troubled land. And yet, even amid the devastation of war, God had arranged for this quiet priest to encounter a man of mystery. Padre Pio was known for his supernatural gifts by location, healing, reading of souls, and, most famously, the visible wounds of Christ, the stigmata, which he bore for 50 years. Despite the awe that surrounded him, it was his humanity that Fr. Giuseppe remembered most clearly. "I remember that I once took his hands and kissed them," he recounted. "I asked if the stigmata were painful, and he replied, 'Well, God didn't give them to me as an enjoyment.'" With that simple response, Fr. Giuseppe saw a glimpse of the saint's realism, humor, and willingness to embrace pain for the sake of love. It was not the mystical phenomena that defined Padre Pio, but his surrender to the divine will, a surrender that quietly shaped Fr. Giuseppe's own journey of faith, a life hidden with Christ in God. Could Fr. Giuseppe Ungaro himself one day be declared a saint? That is not for us to say, though many who knew him would not be surprised. What is certain is that his life was shaped by habits of holiness. Even in the final year of his life, when many would have succumbed to rest or retirement, he remained as committed as ever. At 99 years old, he rose every morning at 3:30 a.m. for prayer and adoration before the Blessed Sacrament. He celebrated daily Mass and spent the rest of his day ministering to people in need, families, the elderly, the sick, and even ex-convicts who had found a new path through his guidance. He was not content with a pious routine. He wanted to live the gospel fully, down to the smallest acts of mercy. As he once said, every man and woman has their own dignity, and it must be defended. And in every person, Jesus is present. That was the compass by which he navigated the world, always looking for the image of Christ in others, especially in the marginalized and forgotten. A model for our time. When the mayor of Padua awarded him the seal of the city in 2018, he captured the essence of Fr. Giuseppe's influence. I was fascinated by him when I met him. During this time when we are all in difficulty, humanly speaking, he reminds us that each one of us can be a missionary in his own land, that to do good we don't have to rule the world, and that here around us there are so many people who need our help. He tells us that we can do good discreetly and humbly, not because poverty should be hidden like something offensive, but because above all, we must respect the dignity of those who experience poverty in their own skin. In an era obsessed with visibility, platforms, and performance, Fr. Giuseppe showed that true greatness lies in self-forgetting love. His life did not make headlines, it made saints. By walking alongside the holy, he became holy himself, not through imitation, but through intimacy with Christ, who animated his every breath, the final chapter, and eternal life. Fr. Giuseppe left this earthly life on May 22, 2019, just 5 days before he would have celebrated his 100th birthday. But as he would remind us, he had already reached that milestone if you count life from conception, a truth that speaks to the sacredness he saw in every moment of existence. His death was quiet, as was his life. But his legacy endures not only in the stories he told or the honors he received, but in the countless hearts he touched. He leaves us with the challenge to see the saints around us and to answer the call to become saints ourselves. In a world desperate for authenticity, Fr. Giuseppe Ungaro reminds us that sanctity is not out of reach. It is as close as our next act of love, our next word of truth, our next encounter with a soul in need. May he now enjoy the fullness of joy in heaven, where, free from earthly limits, he continues to intercede for us. And may his memory stir us to walk the path he walked, a path marked by humility, compassion, fidelity, and unshakable hope.